Harakat Ahrar ash-Sham al-Islamiyya is a coalition of multiple Islamist and Salafist units that coalesced into a single brigade in order to fight against the Ba'athist government led by Bashar al-Assad during the Syrian Civil War. Ahrar ash-Sham was led by Hassan Aboud. In July 2013, Ahrar ash-Sham had 10,000 to 20,000 fighters, making it the second single most powerful unit fighting against al-Assad, after the Free Syrian Army. It was the principal organization operating under the umbrella of the Syrian Islamic Front and is a major component of the Islamic Front. History: the first Ahrar ash-Sham brigades were formed just after the Egyptian Revolution, and before the Syrian Revolution started in 2011. Most of the group founders were Islamist political prisoners who had been detained for years at the Sydney prison until they were released as part of an amnesty by the Syrian government in March-May 2011. At the time of its establishment in late 2011, Ahrar ash-Sham consisted of about 25 rebel units spread across Syria. It has expanded since then. By July 2012, the group's website listed 50 units, and by mid-January 2013, the number had increased to 83 units. Most of these units are headquartered in villages in Idlib Governorate, but many others are located in Hama and Aleppo. Some Ahrar ash-Sham units that have been involved in heavy fighting include the Kawafil al-Shuhada and Ansar al-Haqq brigades, the al-Tawid wal-Iman brigade, the Shorkhba brigade, the Hussein bin Nabat brigade, and the Salahuddin and Abul Fida brigades. Members of the group are Islamists. Ahrar ash-Sham cooperates with the Free Syrian Army and other secular rebel groups. However, it does not maintain ties with the Syrian National Council. Although they coordinate with other groups, they maintain their own strict and secretive leadership, receiving the majority of their funding and support from donors in Kuwait. Through donations from supporters abroad and the capture of materiel from the Syrian armed forces, Ahrar ash-Sham became one of the best-armed, most powerful rebel factions active in the Syrian Civil War, having progressed from the use of improvised explosive devices and small arms ambushes in early 2012 to assuming a lead role in large-scale sustained assaults on multiple fronts by 2013. It regularly deployed tanks and mobile artillery, anti-tank guided missiles, and occasionally 1990s-era Croatian rocket and grenade launchers, and was involved in every major rebel victory over Syrian government forces between September 2012 and mid-2013. It grew significantly by absorbing into its ranks other rebel factions from the Islamic Front and Syrian Islamic Front coalitions. On April 26, 2015, Ahrar ash-Sham, along with other major Aleppo-based groups, established the Fatah Halab Joint Operations Room. The Islamic Front and Ahrar ash-Sham in particular have received weapons from Turkey according to German intelligence. Ideology: the Islamic Movement of Free Men of the Levant is an Islamist, reformist, innovative and comprehensive movement. It is integrated with the Islamic Front and is a comprehensive and Islamic military, political and social formation. It aims to completely overthrow the Assad regime in Syria and build an Islamic state whose only sovereign, reference, ruler, direction, and individual, societal and nationwide unifier is al-Almighty unregistered trademark Sharia. Translated into English by Malak Abkoun at the Al Jazeera Center for Studies. The group has a Syrian leadership and emphasizes that its campaign is for Syria, not for a global jihad. However, according to U.S. intelligence officials, a few al-Qaeda members released from prisons by the Syrian government have been able to influence actions of the group, and install operatives within the senior ranks of Ahrar ash-Sham. Such ties were not disclosed publicly until January 2014, when a former senior leader of Ahrar ash-Sham, the now-deceased Abu Khalid al-Suri, acknowledged his long-time membership in al-Qaeda and role as Ayman al-Zawahiri's representative in the Levant. In its first audio address, Ahrar ash-Sham stated its goal was to replace the Assad government with an Islamic state. However, it acknowledged the need to take into account the population unregistered trademark's current state of mind. It also described the uprising as a jihad against a Safawi plot to spread Shi'ism and establish a Shiite state from Iran through Iraq and Syria, and extending to Lebanon and Palestine. ash-Sham has claimed that it only targets government forces and militia and that it has cancelled several operations due to fear of civilian casualties. It provides humanitarian services and relief to local communities, in addition to pamphlets promoting religious commitment in daily life. ash-Sham leader Hassan Aboud stated that ash-Sham worked with Nusra Front and would have no problems with Nusra as long as they continued fighting Assad. Aboud also said worked with Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant in some battles but that their agenda was disagreeable. Aboud also said all parties shared the same objective of establishing an Islamic State, whether they were ISIS, al-Nusra, the Islamic Front, or the FSA, but they differed as to the tactics, strategies or methods. Aboud noted that in Syria there are no secular groups. Hassan Aboud condemned democracy in an interview with Al Jazeera, saying that democracy is people governing people, according to rules they please. We say that we have a divine system whose law is Allah's for his creatures and his slaves who he appointed as vice-regents on this earth. An Islamic Front Sharia court judge in Aleppo Muhammad Najib Banan stated the legal reference is the Islamic Sharia. The cases are different, from robberies to drug use, to moral crimes. It's our duty to look at any crime that comes to us. After the regime has fallen, we believe that the Muslim majority in Syria will ask for an Islamic State. Of course, it's very important to point out that some say the Islamic Sharia will cut off people's hands and heads, but it only applies to criminals. And to start off by killing, crucifying etc. That is not correct at all. In response to being asked what the difference between the Islamic Front's and ISIS's version of Sharia would be, he said one of their mistakes is before the regime has fallen, and before they've established what in Sharia is called tamkeen, having a stable state, they started applying Sharia, thinking God gave them permission to control the land and establish a caliphate. This goes against the beliefs of religious scholars around the world. This is what is did wrong. This is going to cause a lot of trouble. Anyone who opposes will be considered against Sharia and will be severely punished. An ash-Sham leader Abu Abdul Malik said that the nations do not change drastically overnight and the plant does not ripen suddenly nor does its fruit ripen until they stand upon stalks, and whoever hastens in a thing before its due time will be punished by being deprived of it. The fiqh of Mara 7L is from Siyas Sharia. In the beginning the Prophet called his tribe who were closest to him, then the people of Mecca and the cities around it, then the Arabs specially, then all of mankind. Therefore, measure and prioritize. The United Arab Emirates has designated ash-Sham as a terrorist organization. ash-Sham and the Islamic Front in general issued condolences for Afghan Taliban leader Mullah Omar upon his death. At an ash-Sham seminar on religion in the northern Homs countryside, the Quran verse 48:29 enjoining Muslims to be harsh against the infidels was featured prominently on a white banner. ash-Sham opened a military training camp in Aleppo called the Harsh Against the Infidels Camp. At the border crossing of Bab al-Hawa on the Syria-Turkey border, the white flag of Tawheed was raised by al-Sham. Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey have been actively supporting ash-Sham. A statement issued by ash-Sham thanked Turkey and Qatar for their help. The deceased ash-Sham leader Abu Hamza al-Shaka stated to a gathering of fighters, "Keep in mind that in our route that we chose, soldiers and leaders, is to fight until we conquer or have shahada in the way of Allah." ash-Sham member Dr. Abd al-Karim al-Kurdi tweeted an image of a quote made by Jabhat al-Nusra Sheikh Majid al-Rashid defending and expounding on unity between and Nusra. When interviewed by the Financial Times on August 14, ash-Sham commander Iyad Shah said, "We are not from Mars. We are part of Syrian society and the international community. We want to be part of the solution," Iyad Shah tweeted on October 1. "The West does not grasp that by permitting Russia to occupy Syria, it has opened upon itself the gates of hell. You do not frighten us and praise to God, you will unify us. The Levant is the graveyard of invaders." Notable incidents: ash-Sham was responsible for rescuing NBC journalists Richard Engel, Ghazi Balkis, John Kuastra Cesar Kayavas, and Amashia Khorma after they were kidnapped by the pro-Assad government Shibaya in December 2012. However, this version of events was called into question by an April 2015 investigation by the New York Times. In December 2012, a new umbrella organization was announced, called the Syrian Islamic Front, consisting of 11 Islamist rebel organizations. Ash-Sham was the most prominent of these, and a member of ash-Sham's, Abu Abd al-Rahman al-Suri, served as the front spokesman. In November 2013, the SIF announced that it was dissolving, and that its components would henceforth operate as part of the newly formed Islamic Front. In January 2013, several of the member organizations of the Syrian Islamic Front announced that they were joining forces with ash-Sham into a broader group called Harakat Ahrar al-Islamiyya. In September 2013, members of ISIL killed the ash-Sham commander Abu Ubaidah al-Binishi, after he had intervened to protect a Malaysian Islamic charity. ISIL had mistaken its Malaysian flag for that of the United States. In August 2013, members of the brigade uploaded a video of their downing of a Syrian Air Force MiG-21 over the Latakia province with a Chinese-made FN-6 Manpads, apparently becoming the first recorded kill with such a weapon. In mid-November 2013, after the battle for Brigade 80 near the Aleppo International Airport, fighters from the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant beheaded a commander of ash-Sham forces, mistaking him for an Iraqi Shiite pro-government militiaman. In December 2013, there were reports of fighting between ISIL and another Islamic rebel group in the town of Masgana, Aleppo. Activists reported that the Islamic rebel group was identified as ash-Sham. On February 23, 2014, one of the top commanders and al-Qaeda representative, Abu Khalid al-Suri, was killed in a suicide bombing in Aleppo, organized by ISIL. On September 9, 2014, a bomb went off during a high-level meeting in Idlib province, killing Hassan Aboud, the leader of the group, and 27 other senior commanders, including military field commanders, members of the group's Shura Council, and leaders of allied brigades. There was no claim of responsibility for the attack. The day after the bombing, Abu Jabbar was announced as replacement leader. In early November 2014, representatives from ash-Sham attended a meeting with al-Nusra Front, the Khorasan Group, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, and Jund al-Aqsa, which sought to unite several hardline groups against the Assad regime. However, by November 14, 2014, it was revealed that the negotiations had failed. During the night of November 6, 2014, a U.S. airstrike targeted the group for the first time, hitting its headquarters in Idlib Governorate and killing Abu al-Naz, who was in charge of receiving weapons for the group. On November 24, 2014, a U.S. airstrike on the ISIL headquarters building in Maidan, Raqqa killed another ash-Sham fighter, who was being held prisoner by ISIL. On March 28, 2015, two liquor store owners, a Christian man named Nel Elias and his father Elias Negub, were murdered by ash-Sham in Idlib. The New York Times claimed that it was ordered that compliant Christians were not to be killed by Saudi cleric Abdullah al-Muhsini and that Christians were being defended by ash-Sham, also blaming the Syrian government for bombing the houses of Christians. The New York Times reports turned out to be wrong since ash-Sham killed the Christians. Al-Muhsini is an ally of al-Qaeda. In July 14, 2015, two suicide bombers blew themselves at an ash-Sham movement headquarters, killing Abu Abdul Rahman Salkin and 5 to 6 others in Idlib province. On August 27, 2015, during the ISIS offensive on the city of Mer in northern Aleppo, ash-Sham militants captured and beheaded an injured ISIS fighter. In Rif Dimashq, the Jund al-Malaim Operations Room was created from a merger of Jihad al-Sham, ash-Sham and the al-Qaeda branch al-Nusra Front. See also, List of armed groups in the Syrian Civil War. References. External links, ash-Sham website.